All right, so last week, Dave talked about Elijah. Do you guys remember that? This week, I want to talk about Elisha, all right? Now, just to give a chronological understanding, Elijah came before Elisha, and the reason I always remember that is in the dictionary, "ja" comes before "sha." So that's simple. Now, hey, kids, you guys can go. Good job. I totally forgot. Okay, because "ja" comes before "sha." And so we're going to look at after the time that Dave talked, we're going to look at the time of Elisha. And we're going to look at this specific story in the Bible. And we're really going to camp out in this story and pull some truths from it. But before we jump in, let me tell you, this story is an incredible story. It is action-packed. There is plot twist. This Harry Potter has nothing on the Bible. I'm going to tell you right now. This is going to be a fun story. Many of us have read it, but we haven't read the story all the way through the end, and it's good. So we're going to go ahead and jump into it. There's a number of verses we're going to read. So grab your popcorn. They need to make a movie of this thing. Grab your popcorn. Throw your feet up on the chair in front of you. They won't mind, I promise. And you guys ready to get into this story? It's found in 2 Kings 6. We're going to start in verse 8. Now, the king of Aram was warring against Israel, and he counseled with his servants, saying, "In such and such a place shall be my camp." So real quick, the king of Aram, his name is Ben-Hadad. He's warring against the king of Israel, Jehoram. And what he would do is he would take his army and he would hide them in certain areas to ambush, to catch the Israelite army off guard and ambush them. Verse 9, the man of God, Elisha, not Ja, Elisha, the man of God sent word to the king of Israel, saying, "Beware, you do not pass this place, for the Arameans are coming down there." The king of Israel sent to the place about which the man of God had told him. Thus he warned him, so that he guarded himself there more than once or twice. So basically, Israel had an early warning system. It was the Elisha, the Elisha. Think about this, you guys. This is where the story starts getting crazy. God would tell Elisha about the future. How many of you guys wish God would tell you about the future? Right? Neil, psst, Bitcoin. Come on. I would have loved to write that one out if I only knew. And then also keep you from things like, "Psst, Neil, don't eat that burrito. You'll pay for it tonight." I would have loved to know. But here he is, he's speaking the future and telling Elisha where the Aram army would be. And so he would tell the Israelite king, he'd say, "Hey, send reinforcements here," or "Hey, do not go over there." And this was happening regularly. You can obviously imagine how it drove Ben-Hadad crazy. Verse 11, now the heart of the king of Aram was enraged over this thing. And he called his servants and said to them, "Will you tell me which of us is for the king of Israel?" He's like, "Which one of you guys are spies? Because there's no way that this could be happening unless we have a spy." And one of the servants said, "No, my lord, O king. But Elisha, the prophet who is in Israel, tells the king of Israel the words that you speak in your bedroom." That's scary. I don't know what he said in his bedroom, but sure he doesn't want other people to know. So he said, "Go and see where he is." Ben-Hadad says, "Go and see where Elisha is, that I may send and take him." And it was told him, saying, "Behold, he is in Dothan." So in this moment, Ben-Hadad, we're going to call him Benny moves Elisha to the top of his hit list. He's like, "Go find this guy. Find him, and I'm going to get him." But here's the thing. How do you kill someone who knows what you're going to do before you do it? That's why they can't kill Yoda, right? Here's what he does. Verse 14, he sent horses and chariots and a great army there, and they came by night and surrounded the city. So his plan is to take a great army. Now I'm going to tell you, the city of Dothan is 25 acres in circumference. It's not a big city, but it's a city. How vast of an army are you going to have to be able to have an even greater circumference than that to surround the entire city for one man? Verse 15, now when the attendant of the man of God, now when the servant of Elisha had risen early and gone out, behold, an army with horses and chariots was circling the city. And his servant said to him, alas, my master. And alas, in Hebrew, is the word, ah, that's what it is. Ah, my master. What shall we do? So he answered, do not fear. Elisha says, do not fear, for those who are with us are more than those who are with them. And you just got to feel like the servant's like, 1, 2. Elisha, what are you talking about? Then Elisha prays. Just listen to this prayer. This is such a cool thing of the story. This story has all about understanding perception, sight, and blindness. It says, then Elisha prayed and said, O Lord, I pray, open his eyes that he may see. And the Lord opened the servant's eyes, and he saw. And behold, the mountain around them was full of horses and chariots of fire. All around Elisha, it was God's army of fire. Okay, listen, it's crazy to see a big army surrounding your city, but what if you see a bigger army and they're all of fire? And when they came down to him, Elisha prayed to the Lord. Okay, so now the king of Aram doesn't see this other army. He comes down to him, and Elisha, he comes down to Elisha. I just lost where I am. And Elisha prayed to the Lord and said, strike this people with blindness, I pray. This is the exact opposite prayer that he just prayed for his servant, right? Give him sight, let him see what he can't see. Now he says, strike him with blindness, I pray. And this isn't blindness of the mind, of the eye. This is dullness of the mind. He prayed that there would be no understanding within them. So he struck them with blindness according to the word of Elisha. And then Elisha said to them, this is not the way. You can insert your joke right there about the Mandalorian. Nor is this the city. Follow me and I will bring you to the man whom you seek. And he brought them to Samaria. And this is absolutely savage what he did, because let me explain to you, Samaria is the capital of Israel. It is where Israel's standing army was. So just to make sure we're understanding the intensity of this situation, they come down to kill Elisha, and Elisha's like, give them blindness, and they're all dulled, and then he says, oh, this is not the way. This is the way. Let me bring you. And he's bringing them into Samaria, where the Israelite army is hanging out. And so when they had come into Samaria, Elisha said, "O Lord, I wish I could be here at this point to watch the Aramean army, the Syrian army." He says, "O Lord, open the eyes of these men that they may see." How many of you guys wish you could have been there to watch that? All of a sudden, they're like, whoa, no. And so Lord opened his eyes, and they saw, and behold, they were in the midst of Samaria. And the king of Israel, when he saw them, said to Elisha, "My father, shall I kill him? Shall I kill him?" And the story keeps twisting, and he answered, "You shall not kill them. Would you kill those who have taken captive your sword, that you have taken captive with your sword or your bow? Set bread and water before them, that they may eat and drink and go to their master." So he prepared a great feast for them, and when they had eaten and drunk, he sent them away, and they went to their master, and the marauding bands of the Arameans did not come again into the land of Israel. Hey, that's a cool story, right? Someone in here needs to make a movie about it. I'll watch it. That is a great story. I want to look into this story, and I want to pull out a couple truths this morning about what God has buried inside of the story, and we could talk on weeks on this thing. But the first thing that I want to pull out of this story is this. It's something that all of us need to be reminded about, and it's that there will always be a surrounding army. There will always be attacks and affront of the devil in our lives, and we need to make sure that we are not caught off guard. We live in a world that is hostile towards the things of God and towards the people of God. Jesus promises us this very thing. He says that there is going to be problems in this world. He says it right here in John 15, verses 18 and 19. He says this to us. He promises us there will always be a surrounding army in our life. If the world hates you, you know that it had hated me before it hated you. He's telling us right now, do not be caught off guard. The world is not for you. The world is against you. Do not be caught off guard. When you walk outside, there will always be problems. But then he says this, if you were of the world would love its own. And that is a whole different message right there. If you don't have quarrel with this world, are you worried that you are loved by the world? There's a problem there, but that's a message for a different time. But because you are not of this world, but I chose you out of this world, because of this, the world hates you. Too many Christians have gotten confused and have this idea that they can have both peace with God and peace with the world. So they let their guard down. That's worth saying again. Too many times we as Christians have got confused that we can have both peace with God and peace with this world, so we let our guard down. But the real thing that we need to do is never let our guard down. We always need to have our guard up when it comes to the things of the world, because when you have your guard down, you are more ready to fall. When you are taken off guard, you have a higher chance of falling and being in pain. 1 Peter 5:8 says this. Paul wants us to make sure of this very thing. He says, be of sober spirit. Be on the alert. It means be ready. Do not get caught off guard. Have your guard up. Be ready, because the adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion seeking someone to devour. We need to be aware and ready for what he does. We need to be watchful, because when you're caught off guard, things hurt more. And this is both real in the physical world as it is in the spiritual world. When I was 19, I was at the Del Mar Fair with my girlfriend at the time, my wife now. I locked that up, don't worry. And we're at the Del Mar Fair, and we're walking through the tents with all the booths, and Jesse Schwarm and Jeremy Miller are with me, and we come up into this one booth area, and they're doing those things. Bruce Lee, I saw all these documentaries with him, and he was absolutely ripped, if you guys remember, and he had these little patches that he would put on different muscles that would send electrical pulses that would work out his muscles. Have you guys seen those? Well, I always thought that was cool, and they literally had them right here, and they were giving trials, like you could do it. And so there was 5 seats, and 4 of the seats were taken, so I ran up and I jumped in the seat because I wanted to try it. And the problem was I didn't get explained what was going to happen. They were telling the other 4, and I sat down at the end. Let me tell you what they were telling the other 4. They said, okay, so what's going to happen is we're going to put these patches all over your skin. They're going to send an electrical pulse into your arm, and it's going to contract all of your muscles. So your bicep and your wrist is going to come in, and you need to pull your bicep and wrist back. And it's going to come in, and you pull it back. And then she said, otherwise, it's going to be really painful. And all I heard was painful. That was the only word I got. And I know something, when something's painful, what you do, I've learned, is you leave, like if you're going to get a shot, you leave your arm limp. Do you guys all know that, right? You leave it completely and utterly limp, so you're not engaging all of your cells, your nerve cells. You leave it limp, and it hurts less. So there I was standing with all of this stuff, electricity about to be shot in my arm, and I am 100% limp in the arm. And it was about to hurt. You guys ever had a muscle spasm? Yeah, they're horrible, huh? Okay, so I'm sitting there. My girlfriend, who I'm trying to impress right here, and she's like, are you guys ready to start? I'm like, yeah. And all of a sudden, the electricity starts shooting through my arm. My arm curls up involuntarily. My biceps start spasming because it's trying to get as small as possible. My shoulder goes in, my wrist goes down, and out of my mouth, in the middle of the Del Mar Fair, I go, ah! In front of my girlfriend. And then I'm like, ah! And then it stops, and I think, oh, good, I'm gonna live. And I pull my arm out, I look at my girlfriend, Heather, and I say, oh my gosh, there was so much, ah! Because it hit the second time. I didn't know it was gonna keep going. And her eyes are huge. Let me tell you, all the rest of the guys are sitting there like, this guy's an idiot. This doesn't hurt at all. And everybody at the Del Mar Fair is looking at me. Sometimes when you're caught off guard, it hurts more. And that is both true in the physical as it is in the spiritual. Look at the difference between the servant and Elisha. As they go out, the servant is caught off guard. And what happens to him? Fear comes over him. Worry comes over him. He feels like he's going to die. His life shoots out of him. How quickly he forgets of all of the good things that God has done while he's been with Elisha. Think about the things that God had done with Elisha. All those things ran out of his mind because he was unaware. Because he was caught off guard. We need to make sure we're people that aren't caught off guard. Elisha wasn't caught off guard. Elisha remembered the way that God had used him in the past. Through Elisha, God had parted the Jordan River. Through Elisha, God had changed the bad waters, actually translated to the evil waters at Jericho, to be purified waters. He changed an ecosystem. When those kids were making fun of Elisha, come on, you guys remember? Elisha cursed them and bears went out and ate them. I mean, God moved through this guy. And the widow, remember? He through Elisha, he multiplied the widow's oil. He brought the widow, her son, back to life. We're just getting done with the story of Naaman and Naaman's leprosy miraculously being brought off him. Elisha remembered God's goodness in his past. He was not caught off guard. He was on guard. And so when this surrounding army comes, Elisha's not surprised. It's like he says, no, I know this is going to be here. Servant, you got to realize there's always going to be a surrounding army because the devil doesn't like me and I don't like him. But let's see what God's going to do inside of this circumstance. When people get caught off guard, life's situations, when something comes up, they become hopeless because they're not watching out. Listen, people who are caught off guard fall down, but people who are on guard fight back. Isn't that the truth? People who are caught off guard, they crumble and they fall, and people who are on guard fight back. Let me tell you right now, Foothills, it is time that we make sure that we start putting our arms up and we get in guard mode so that when the enemy attacks, we don't fall, we punch back. Think about this. Think about what's happened to us just recently. The enemy came in. He went to our Christian preschool where we're teaching kids Christian values, and he shut it down. How dare you? And we are now already trying, but we are now punching back with what? A federal lawsuit. We're bringing them to federal court to get them not just out of Foothill School, but out of all Christian preschools. Here's the cool thing about God. God punches even harder. You know, they're trying to put these evil agendas in our public schools. So we're like, taking kids out of public schools, putting them into Christian schools, saying we're doubling down. It's punching back. And Elisha, in this moment, I love Elisha's punch. He brings him to Samaria. This was a crazy punch. God punches hard. This was a John Cena punch to the devil's no-nos. That's exactly what happened in this story. God punches harder. Can I just say, listen, the devil's gonna scheme. It's who he is. And if we're not ready for it, then we don't punch back, we fall. We just have to realize we are not at peace in this world. This world is hostile to the things of God. If the enemy is attacking, I'm gonna tell you what's going on. It means two things. If the enemy is attacking, it means A, you're alive, and B, you're worth attacking. You're worth attacking. The world will love its own. If you're of the world, you may not feel the attacks. But as the world hated him, so it will hate us. We need to be on our guard. But the great truth is God is never caught off guard, is he? I love this idea because as you read the Bible, what constantly happens is the devil plays into God's hand, right? He plays into God's ways, and that's what happens here. I want to look at the next thing as we go through. God is never caught off guard. I want you guys to understand this and know this, is that things are not always as they seem. It's the next thing we pull from this story. Things are not always as they seem. In fact, many times things are not as they seem. I got a call 2 years ago, or a text from one of my friends. He has a 11-year-old boy, and he's like, Neil, I need to talk to you before I go home from work today. It's really important. I got some family problems. And so I call him up and he says, listen, my wife and I were going through my son's phone and we found a naked picture of him. He took a picture of the mirror in his backside. And we're pretty sure that he's sexting his girlfriend. And what that means is sending naked pictures to his girlfriend. And we're devastated. And I'm like, oh man, I'm so sorry. And so we talked about it and what he needs to do. I was like, first off, man, 11-year-olds should not have cell phones like this. You need to figure this thing out. You need to take it. And we go through this whole talk and I pray with him and I'm like, let me know how it goes. And he's really wearing it, as I would, as many of us would. And so that night at 6:30, I get a call from him. I'm like, babe, I got to grab this call. And I get this call, expecting to hear this guy crying. And he is hysterically laughing. I'm like, okay, I thought you'd be crying. It went well, huh? He's like, Neil, I got home and I called my son. I was like, hey, let's go talk. And my wife's like, wait. Let me talk to you first. She's like, while you were gone at work, our son brought us into the room and he said, Mom, I need to talk to you privately. I don't want my siblings to know. And she starts fluttering. He's gonna come clean. You know what I mean? He's got a conscience. This is great. And he's got his phone and he's like, I don't really know how to say this, but I have something growing on my butt. Look, and he zooms in. He had a butt zit. So he took a picture of the mirror of the back so he could see what it was. His first zit, butt zit. He was not sending pictures to his girlfriend. Things are not always as they seem, so my friend is just so happy. I'm like, you take that phone still. It's the same truth in the spiritual realm that it is in the physical realm. So often things are not as they seem. And here we are at this story. And in verse 17, it says, then Elisha prayed and said, oh Lord, I pray, open his eyes that he may see. And the Lord opened the servant's eyes and he saw what was unseen. Things are not always as they seem. This is one of those times I would have loved to watch as this servant sees the unseen. In one moment, this servant is worried. In the next moment, there's no problem. He saw what was unseen. He saw what was hidden. He saw the God factor in life. He saw into the kingdom where God is at reign, and it gave him courage. The God factor is everywhere. The problem is that a lot of times we're not looking for it. The God factor is everywhere. David saw it when he volunteered to fight Goliath. He saw it. He knew it. He was little and young. It didn't matter. My God is big and strong. Paul saw it on the road to Damascus. Moses saw it when he went to Pharaoh to demand Pharaoh let his people go. Mark and Dave saw it when they started this church and when they've done all the things here, and people all over this city see it. When they stand up against the devil's schemes, hands up, ready to punch back. They see that God punches harder. That there are more for us than who can be. There's more for us than he that is against us. If God is for me, then no one, doesn't matter. Nothing and no one can be against me. It's them seeing into this spiritual realm. It's the incredible truth that God is at work even when we don't see him working. It's this world that we can miss, the unseen that we can miss if we're not looking. It is a world full of God's provision, his protection, his security. It's a world where impossible things happen. They're made possible. You guys had impossible things happen inside of your life. It's this whole nature, it's this whole dimension where joy triumphs pain, where people can worship in times of trouble and that they are victorious because it's this dimension where God intercedes for us, speaks for us, and helps us, and it's real. And in this moment, the servant sees what Elisha always knew what was there. And when he sees it, at one moment, fear has taken him. In one moment, he looks out at the landscape and he's afraid. How many of us have looked over the landscape of the last 2 years, and fear and doom and gloom have overcome us? In the news, or our economic state, or what's going on in the world, and we look out and we read those things, and fear and worry and anxiety come over us, and we don't know how life can go on anymore. Well, when you see the unseen, that falls off. And courage and boldness come up. You know, the last time I checked, let me just say this. God still sits on the throne, doesn't he? And thank you, God. And it doesn't matter what I see on the news, because God is still on that throne, and he still dictates the hearts and the ways of men. But here's the problem, is we don't always see what's going on. I want to look at this passage buried between the parable of the soils in Matthew 13. You got the parable of the soils, and then you have the explanation of the parables of the soil. The disciples ask Jesus something. They ask him, why do you speak in parables? And this is what Jesus says. Matthew 13 through 14. He says this. He says, therefore, I speak to them in parables, because while seeing, they do not see. While blepo, with their eyes, seeing with their eyes, they do not araho, perceive and understand. While seeing, they do not see. While hearing, they do not hear, nor do they understand. In their case, the prophecy of Isaiah is being fulfilled, which says, you will keep on hearing, but will not understand. And you will keep on seeing, but you will not perceive. There's two things going on here. Jesus is saying you can both hear and understand. You can see and perceive. He says all men and women see and hear, but not all men and women see and perceive, hear and understand. There is a way where we can see beyond what is going on. The problem that we have, especially in the American church, is that we're blinded by our own sight. We are blinded by our own sight. At times in our life, we live just leaning on God, and we would see the unseen start working in our life. But as we start getting more consistencies inside of our life, we start being blinded by our own abilities and our own sight. We get so focused on the things that we can see with our eyes alone, and we start leaning onto our own understandings, and we start missing everything else going on. You know, the parents that are so focused on their kids' sport and every practice, that they start letting their kids miss youth group, and before they know it, they don't even realize that they've been blinded to the fact that they're feeding their athleticism, but starving their spirituality. Or it's the person that is so focused on their career, they're moving forward, but they're losing their marriage. The man that has got his golf game down to a certain point, but he's losing relationship with his kids. It's not being able to see because of the things that we have put in front of us. It's watching the news and letting fear take over instead of saying, I can't wait to see what God is going to do. Not getting caught off guard, standing up with our fists. It's missing the Lord's moving, speaking. My son, 13 years old, so proud of him. A couple days ago, something happened with him. Every morning at 8:30, he goes and he cleans all the neighbors' pools. It's his job. It's what he does. 8:30. It doesn't matter, rain or shine. I tell him, I go to work, you go to work, dude, because I don't care about these pools. I'm raising sons, right? And so he's out and he goes, one of our neighbors has this really long driveway, and once a week there's a gardener there that he talks to on the way up the driveway. So he gets up, he cleans the guy's pool, he grabs the money that they left him for that month, and he's walking down and he hears the Lord tell him, 13 years old, he hears the Lord tell him, give that guy $20. Now for a kid, $20 is not a little amount of money. And my son's like, I don't know. The Bible says, you do not work, you do not eat. I'm working, I'm eating. It's my money. God's like, whose money? And he's like, 13 years old, he's hearing it. He's sensing it. He's getting an idea of it. He's training his mind to know it. And he's like, oh. So he goes down to this landscaper, and he's like, hey, I think God wants you to have this. And the landscaper, like a good adult, doesn't take money from kids. He's like, no, hey, thank you, buddy. No, I'm not gonna take it. And Gavin's like, but God's telling me to give it. And the landscaper's like, no, I have lots of those. You don't have as many as I have. You take it. Like, he wouldn't take it. And so the guy wouldn't accept it. So Gavin leaves with his money and he says to me, Dad, he goes right home after this job. He says, Dad, when I left, I just felt God smiling down upon me. Isn't that cool? And as I'm talking, he's filled with God because he saw and he heard and he perceived and he understood. I was talking to another couple just this last week. Went over to their house to meet with them. And about almost a year ago today, they went through one of the biggest struggles of their marriage. I mean, almost certain that they were going to get a divorce. Did not look like things were going to be brought back together. Some incredible stuff got brought up to the light, and it looked like it was the end of this couple. And they decided, let's just meet with someone. And so they met with 2 counselors here at the church. And these 2 counselors started helping them see what was unseen inside of their marriage. Started to see this whole different world of God's help, and that he could change the situation and he could restore them. And I was at their house yesterday, a few days ago, and I was sitting with them, and I'm telling you, it was this new love that was upon them. They did not get divorced. They worked everything out, and the Lord did this incredible healing inside of their lives and their lives together. And they're just sitting there like beaming in their love and in their excitement for the things of God, because they started to see what was hidden. They started to see the kingdom's work inside of their life. And they're sitting and they're saying, I just wish everybody could know this. I just wish everybody could see that. And I'm like, I know, me too. And they were just beaming with it. So how do we see and perceive? How do we see the unseen? Well, let's keep looking in Matthew 13, because he gives us an answer. He says this. We're going to read 14 and then 15. So we just read this. In their case, the prophecy of Isaiah is being fulfilled, which says, you will keep on hearing but not understand. You will keep on seeing but will not perceive. For, he's about to explain it. The what? For the heart of this people has become what? Listen, you don't see and perceive, you don't hear and understand, because the heart of this people has become dull. The truth is that this is not an eye problem. This is a heart problem. You know, Paul prays. He says, I pray that you would enlighten the eyes of their heart to see different. The problem here is their heart had become dull. Oh, man. In America, with all the stuff we have and the ability of us to take care of things on our own, it's such a constant fight to fight off the dullness of our hearts. But let's go back now and let's take this idea of dullness to 2 Kings 6. Let's go to verse 18. It says this, now he's talking to the Aram army. He says, when they came down, Elisha prayed to the Lord and said, strike this people with what? Blindness, but not physical blindness, dullness. Take away their understanding. Take away their perception. Dull their mind. It's the same exact thing on this side. God gives sight to see the unseen, but we miss the unseen when we allow our lives and ourselves to become dull. Dullness is natural. It is natural to become more dull to things. It is hard to always stoke the fire, isn't it? Dullness of our lives to the things of God cut off our ability to see him and hear him. So how do we see him? We need to stoke the parts of us that look towards God. There's this part of our brain. It's called the RAS. And I'm going to butcher it because I always do. Reticular activating system. Say that 5 times fast. Or just once for 3 services. You won't get it. Okay. The RAS, it's an area of our brain, a clump of nerves that does a specific task. In our brain, it filters all of the stimuli that's around sight, sound, smells, feel, all of those things, it filters what we allow to actually come into our brain and what we push aside. Because you guys know that if we process every single thing that went on around us, we would all go nuts and crazy, right? So it decides what is going to be noticed by our brain and what we're not going to notice. And it does this by making categories. It makes categories in our brain for what's important and what's not important. And I'll show you exactly how this works right now, because all of us have experienced this before. How many guys went and bought a car? You're like, oh, that's a really cool car. I've never seen that before. And you drove it away, and then everybody has that car. You guys experience that? They didn't buy it because they saw you with it. They had it before, but you didn't have a category that said that this is important, so you never noticed it. It was all the cars that just drove by you that you didn't notice, but now it was important to you, so now you noticed. What about a ringtone? You guys ever get a new phone, you're like, oh, it's a new ringtone, and all of a sudden you're like, why does everybody have my ringtone now? They've always had it. They're not following your lead. It's just that your brain has pushed them all out, right? I have a specific ringtone to wake me up. Do you guys have a specific alarm? Yeah? When you hear that noise go out inside this world, does like aggression and anger come up? It does for me. I'm like, turn that off! Like, it wasn't even bad a second ago. It's this category that has made this sound important for this special reason. So we have this thing that works in our life, and let's have the band come up. Part of the problem that we run into is that just as the RAS makes categories, it also gets rid of categories that aren't important to us anymore. It works both ways. As we buy this car, I never see my old cars around because I don't care anymore. I don't hear my old ringtones anymore because I don't care anymore. And this works good and bad for us, because as we want to see the unseen, we need to create categories for the Lord that are important to us. And we need to make sure that any of the categories that we've lost because of dullness in our life, we gain back. Let's stand up right now. You know, it's interesting. The best way to see the unseen is to start looking with our hearts in the right direction. This is an interesting thing. It's not a mystery, okay? It's not a mystery why when we come to church on Sundays, our problems seem a lot smaller. Is that true? You know, when we get where the presence of the Lord is, we start seeing a little bit of the unseen, and it gives us hope for the problems that we are. It's when we're out in the world that we start feeling hopelessness come in. It's because here we have a category for Jesus, but out there a lot of us have become dull. And it's time to start building categories back inside of our lives. It's what we need to do.